"Mother, what are you doing here in this filthy place?" Sheikh Rashid's cry echoed through the marble and gold mansion, but it was a sound muffled by disbelief and horror. Freshly returned from his business travels, the magnate opened the basement door, and the smell of mold and despair revealed a scene that tore at his soul. His own mother, the venerable matriarch of his lineage, huddled on the cold, damp floor, dressed in rags, hungry and with a lost gaze. Her eyes, once bright, now carried the weight of silent humiliation. He knew something terrible had happened, but what he was about to discover about his own wife would change his family's destiny forever. Rashid knelt on the icy floor, the luxurious fabric of his travel attire brutally contrasting with the rags covering his mother's frail body. His eyes, which once scanned stock markets and billion-dollar deals, were now fixed on the huddled figure before him, a knot of pain tightening in his throat. "Mother, for God's sake, what happened to you? Who did this?" His voice trembled, laden with a rising fury he could barely contain. He reached out, hesitant, as if fearing a touch might disintegrate the little strength she still possessed. The matriarch, with an almost inaudible moan, tried to move, but her limbs felt heavy, aching. The dignity that had always characterized her was now crushed under the weight of shame and suffering. She raised her gaze to her son, and Rashid saw there not only despair, but a fleeting glimmer of relief mixed with a deep fear. Her cracked lips tried to form words, but only a weak sigh escaped. He realized she was malnourished, her cheeks hollow, her bones prominent beneath her pale skin. The smell of the basement, a mixture of dampness, mold, and something more repulsive, clung to her clothes and tangled hair. With tenderness, Rashid helped her to her feet. She swayed, her legs weak and trembling, showing she hadn't walked properly in a long time. The difficulty in standing was an additional blow to her soul, he knew. He supported her, feeling the shocking lightness of her body in his arms. "Let's get out of here, Mother, right now." He led her out of the foul basement. Each step was torture for her, and for him, a stab to the heart. The light of the mansion's main corridor, which once represented the splendor of his life, now seemed dazzling and cruel, illuminating the extent of his mother's disgrace. As he led her upstairs, Rashid looked for any sign of his wife, Layla, but the mansion was strangely silent. The silence, once a luxury, now seemed complicit. He gently seated her on a soft sofa in the living room, furniture she hadn't seen in months, perhaps years. His mother looked around, her eyes scanning the art objects and sumptuous fabrics, a solitary tear tracing a path down her marked face. It was a stark contrast between the luxury that surrounded her and the misery she had been forced to live in. Rashid knelt before her again, holding her cold, thin hands. "Mother, please tell me, who did this? Was it Layla?" The question, whispered with a mixture of dread and certainty, hung in the air. The matriarch squeezed her son's hands, her expression hardening slightly. With her other trembling hand, she fumbled beneath the rags she still wore, and Rashid watched with perplexity as she pulled out a small rectangular object. It was an old cell phone, scratched but intact. Their eyes met, and in hers, Rashid read a story of courage and a promise of justice. He took the device, his heart pounding in his chest. What would be recorded there? The raw, naked truth was about to be revealed, and Rashid knew the world he knew was about to crumble. The fury he felt began to bubble up, hot and uncontrollable, promising a storm that would sweep away all the falsehood and cruelty from his home. Rashid felt the weight of the small device in his hands, a weight that went far beyond its material form. With trembling fingers, he turned it on, and the screen lit up, revealing a simple interface, almost childlike in its clarity. There was only one folder named Truth. He clicked, and a sequence of videos opened, each a small window into an abyss of cruelty. The first showed Layla, his wife, impeccable in a silk dress that cost more than many annual salaries. with a cold smile on her lips, throwing a piece of dry bread on the floor of what appeared to be the mansion's kitchen. The unstable camera focused on his mother's aged hand, reaching out to pick up the food with broken dignity, her shoulders slumped in resignation. Rashid's eyes widened, the image seared into his mind. It was his mother, the same woman who was now beside him, but there, in that video, she seemed even more fragile, more humiliated, a mere shadow of herself. He moved to the next video, and the knot in his throat tightened, almost suffocating him. This time, the recording was from the basement, the darkness and dampness palpable even through the screen. Layla's voice, sharp and disdainful, echoed with icy coldness. "This is where you belong, you useless old woman, away from my sight and my luxury, where no one needs to see your decay." The image trembled as his mother, with a muffled moan, was pushed into the dark cubicle, and the wooden door slammed shut with a dry thud, sealing her in darkness and silence. Rashid felt a shiver of horror run through every fiber of his spine. His mother, the woman who had raised him with so much love, with so much sacrifice, treated like an animal, confined to such an inhumane place, deprived of light and affection. He looked at his mother, who watched him with tear-filled eyes, a silent plea for recognition of her pain, for validation of her terrible experience. Each video was a blow, a stab to his heart. One showed his mother, huddled in the coldest corner of the basement, trying to warm herself with a torn and dirty blanket, while the sound of distant laughter, probably from some luxurious party in the mansion, invaded the basement, mocking her misery. Another, recorded from a different perspective, showed Layla instructing the servants with an expression of superiority not to give food to the old woman or to ignore her requests, under penalty of losing their own jobs. The cruelty was calculated, methodical, cold as ice. Rashid's face hardened, his fists clenched so tightly that his nails dug into the palms of his hands. The image of the wife he loved and trusted, the woman he had brought into his home, crumbled before his eyes, revealing a monstrosity he would never have imagined inhabiting a human being. He felt the heat of anger rising, an overwhelming wave that threatened to consume him. His mother, sensing the intensity of his emotion, touched his arm with her weak, wrinkled hand, a gesture that sought to calm him and at the same time reinforce the urgency of her situation. Rashid looked at her, and the pain in her eyes mirrored his own. But there was also a renewed strength, a hope he could not disappoint. He couldn't believe all this had happened under his own roof while he was away, building an empire that ironically was supposed to provide security, comfort, and dignity for his family. The shame of his blindness, the guilt for not having noticed the signs, was almost as painful as the rage boiling in his veins. He turned off the cell phone, the dark screen reflecting his face contorted by fury and sadness, a mask of pain and determination. The truth was undeniable, irrefutable. The evidence was there, recorded with the desperate courage of a mother who refused to be silenced, who fought for her voice. Rashid stood up, the decision crystal clear in his eyes, an inextinguishable flame of justice. The mansion, once a symbol of his fortune and happiness, now seemed a stage of horrors, a monument to betrayal. He could no longer tolerate Layla's presence under his roof, not for a second. Justice for his mother would be swift and relentless. He looked at her, his eyes conveying a silent promise that her dignity would be restored, that her suffering would be avenged, and that peace and respect would once again reign in that home. The time of cruelty was over, and a new dawn, albeit painful, was about to break. Rashid stood up, his posture erect, but his heart ablaze. His eyes, once tear-filled with pain, now burned with relentless determination. He didn't need to look for Layla. Her voice, loud and laughing, echoed from the main hall, where she was probably engrossed in some triviality, oblivious to the storm brewing. Each of Rashid's steps down the marble corridor was heavy, laden with the gravity of the truth he carried. The mansion, once a refuge of peace, now seemed a scene of betrayal, each luxury object a silent reminder of the hypocrisy that reigned there. Upon entering the hall, Layla was seated on one of the velvet sofas, laughing with her phone in hand, probably chatting with a friend about trivialities. Her silk dress flowed elegantly, and jewels sparkled at her neck and wrists, a shocking contrast to the rags his mother had worn moments before. She looked up, a condescending smile forming on her lips as she saw Rashid. "Darling, what a pleasant surprise. I thought you wouldn't arrive until tomorrow." Her voice was mellifluous, but Rashid felt a chill. Her smile vanished when she noticed the grim expression on her husband's face, the absence of warmth in his eyes. "Layla," Rashid's voice was a contained thunder, "we need to talk, now." He didn't sit, remaining standing, imposing, the shadow of his fury looming over her. The matriarch, leaning on a nearby armchair, watched the scene in silence, her fragility framed by her son's newfound strength. Layla rose slowly, curiosity mixed with a flicker of apprehension. "What's wrong, Rashid? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse than a ghost, Layla. I saw the truth." He extended his mother's cell phone to her, the screen still dark, but the object's meaning was undeniable. "I know everything. Every humiliation, every day of hunger, every night in the foul basement. I know what you did to my mother." His voice rose in intensity, but he kept it under control by a thread. Layla's face paled, the blood draining from her features. Her eyes, once full of scorn, now showed a growing dread. This is absurd, Rashid. Your mother is... She's confused. Old and senile, you know how it is." She tried to force a laugh, but the sound died in her throat. "I always treated her with respect. She is the matriarch, after all." "Don't lie to me, Layla." Rashid's voice exploded, making her recoil. "The evidence is here, recorded by her, with the courage you tried to crush. You confined her, humiliated her, deprived her of everything. You treated her like trash while living in the luxury she helped build." He pointed to his mother, who now trembled slightly, but kept her gaze fixed on Layla, a dignified stillness in her pain. Layla tried to argue, her lips trembling. "But Rashid, I was just trying to maintain order. She was becoming a burden. You were away, I had to manage everything." Her words were desperate, a pathetic attempt to justify the unjustifiable. Rashid shook his head, disappointment and revulsion visible in every feature of his face. "There is no justification for cruelty, Layla. There is no forgiveness for inhumanity. This house is no longer your home. You are expelled, now. Take what you can carry and get out of my life, out of my mother's life, forever." Rashid's words fell like stones upon Layla, crushing any remnant of her arrogance. She stared at him, incredulous, her eyes wide. The mansion, which she considered her kingdom, suddenly seemed to collapse around her. She tried to appeal, reaching out, but Rashid recoiled, the barrier between them unbreakable. "There's nothing more to say," he concluded, his voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "My mother deserves peace, dignity, and love, and you are not part of that." He turned to his mother, a gentle, protective smile replacing his fury. "Mother, we will take care of you. Everything will be all right now." The matriarch, with a deep sigh of relief, reached out to her son, her eyes shining with tears of gratitude and renewed hope. Justice, though painful, had finally arrived, and with it, the promise of healing. Layla remained paralyzed for an instant, incredulity etched on her face, which had previously displayed such haughtiness. Her lips moved, but no coherent words escaped, only a guttural sound of shock and rage. Sheikh Rashid, without averting his gaze, gestured to the security guards who, like silent statues, had witnessed the scene, their faces impassive, but their eyes revealing the gravity. They approached Layla, who finally found her voice, a sharp cry of protest that echoed painfully through the hall. "Rashid, you can't do this. I am your wife." But her words found no echo in the stony heart he now displayed to her, a heart hardened by his mother's pain. "You lost that right the moment you humiliated my mother, the moment you confined her to darkness and despair," Rashid retorted, his voice cold as desert ice, severing any thread of hope. The guards, respectfully but with unwavering firmness, escorted her out of the hall. She tried to resist, her eyes flashing sparks of hatred at the matriarch, who merely watched, a silent tear tracing her wrinkled face, a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Layla was led out of the mansion, her screams and pleas echoing across the vast property before being muffled by the closing of the massive oak doors. A heavy yet purifying silence descended upon the home, as if the very air was cleansing itself of a stain. Rashid turned to his mother, his expression of fury dissolving into a protective tenderness that warmed the room. He knelt again, holding her hands gently, feeling the fragility of her bones. "Mother, it's over. You are safe now. No one will hurt you again." He noticed the persistent tremor in her body, a remnant of the terror she had endured. "Let's take you to a warm place for a relaxing bath so you can eat something nutritious and rest in peace." He lifted her carefully, feeling the light weight of her body, and with a nod, called the housekeeper Mrs. Fatima, a trusted woman who had served the family for decades and had been dismissed by Layla. Fatima, her eyes welling up with emotion and relief, approached quickly, her face expressing a mixture of deep sadness and contained joy. "My Sheikh, I am so sorry. I tried, but she wouldn't let me help the matriarch." Rashid nodded, understanding Fatima's helplessness. "It's not your fault, Fatima. Now please prepare the main bedroom for my mother and everything she needs to feel comfortable and loved." Mrs. Fatima guided Rashid and his mother to the most luxurious bedroom in the mansion, the one that had belonged to the matriarch before Layla confined her to the basement. The room was impeccable, as if awaiting her triumphant return, with silk curtains and Persian rugs. Rashid seated her on the soft bed, covered with Egyptian silk sheets, a stark contrast to the rags and cold floor of the basement. Fatima brought a basin of warm water and aromatic herbs, and with tenderness began to clean the matriarch's feet, a gesture of reverence and care that spoke more than 1,000 words. Rashid watched, his heart heavy with past pain, but also warmed by hope. "Mother, you deserve all the comfort in the world. You have always been the light of this house, the pillar of our family." His mother looked at him, her eyes still tired, but with a glimmer of gratitude and a glimpse of peace. She murmured, her voice weak but laden with emotion, "My son, my Rashid, you have returned to me." While Fatima cared for her with maternal affection, Rashid asked for a light, nutritious meal to be brought, prepared with the finest ingredients. He himself helped her eat, spoon by spoon, with the same patience and love she had dedicated to him as a child. Each mouthful was a step in recovery, each exchanged glance, a bond strengthening healing invisible wounds. The matriarch, little by little, felt life returning to her weakened body. The warmth of the room, the softness of the bed, her son's unconditional affection, all were a balm for her wounded and exhausted soul. Rashid silently promised himself that he would never again allow such cruelty to happen under his roof. He would reorganize his life, his schedule, to ensure his mother was always under his care, surrounded by love, respect, and the dignity that was her right. Justice was not merely Layla's expulsion, it was the rebuilding of his mother's dignity, the restoration of peace, and the reaffirmation of family ties that had been so brutally severed. He felt a deep guilt for his prolonged absence, but also a renewed strength to be the pillar his mother had always been for him. Night fell upon the mansion, but the darkness no longer brought the damp cold and terror of the basement. Rashid remained by his mother's side, holding her hand, feeling the faint, comforting warmth of her skin. He told stories of his travels, of distant places, of how he missed her wisdom, her counsel, and her welcoming smile. The matriarch, with a faint but genuine smile, finally closed her eyes, finding a peaceful and deep sleep, free from the fear and humiliation that had imprisoned her for so long. Rashid knew the healing journey would be long and full of challenges, but he was ready for every step, for every obstacle. The house, once stained by cruelty and betrayal, began to breathe a new air of hope and renewal, a sanctuary of love and respect. The family, though wounded, was reuniting, stronger and more united than ever, under the aegis of unconditional love and restored justice. He looked at his mother's cell phone, which lay on the bedside table, a silent testament to human resilience and the truth that, in the end, would always prevail. He looked at his mother's cell phone, which lay on the bedside table, a silent testament to human resilience and the truth that, in the end, would always prevail. Night advanced, and with it, a different quiet settled over the mansion, a peace that had long been absent. Rashid remained vigilant, watching his mother sleep, her face marked by pain, but now serene. Each of her breaths was a reminder of the responsibility he carried, of the promise that from that moment on, she would only know love and care. Guilt still gnawed at him, a slow poison, for his absence and for not having noticed the signs, but the determination to right the wrong was a fire burning brightly in his chest. With the first lights of dawn filtering through the silk curtains, the matriarch began to awaken. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the soft light. For an instant, confusion clouded her gaze, the familiar fear of the basement still present in her memory. She fumbled at the soft bed, feeling the texture of the fine sheets, and a trembling sigh escaped her lips. Rashid, who was watching her, leaned in gently. "Good morning, my mother. You are safe. You are in your room." His voice was a balm, and the touch of his hand on her arm, an anchor. The matriarch looked at him, and a glimmer of recognition and relief flooded her eyes. A solitary tear fell, but this time it was not of pain, but of deep gratitude and new-found hope. She tried to sit up, and Rashid helped her with the delicacy of one caring for a fragile treasure. "My son," she murmured, her voice still hoarse, but with a thread of strength not heard in a long time. "It's real, then?" The doubt in her question revealed the depth of her trauma, the difficulty in accepting that the nightmare had ended. Rashid squeezed her hand, his eyes conveying all the sincerity of his heart. "It's real, mother, and it will never be different again. I am here, forever." At that moment, Mrs. Fatima entered the room, carrying a tray with herbal tea and a small plate of fresh fruit. Her eyes, still swollen from crying the night before, now shone with contained joy. She approached the matriarch, kneeling with reverence. "My lady, what joy to see you here in your rightful place." She took the matriarch's hand and kissed it with affection. The matriarch smiled faintly at Fatima, a smile that barely reached her eyes, but which was a sign that human connection, so long denied, was beginning to heal. Rashid watched the scene, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the strength that came from that unconditional love. He knew that recovery would be a slow process, that the emotional wounds were deep, but Fatima's presence, the loyalty of his servants, and his own love would be the pillars of this reconstruction. He helped his mother drink the tea, spoon by spoon, watching her savor each sip, each piece of fruit. It was more than food. It was a symbol of care, of restored dignity. The mansion, which for so long had been a stage of silent cruelty, now filled with a new energy, a breath of renewal. The path to wholeness would be long, but the matriarch was no longer alone. She had her son, her home, and the promise of a future where justice and love would prevail. The mansion, which for so long had been a stage of silent cruelty, now filled with a new energy, a breath of renewal. The path to wholeness would be long, but the matriarch was no longer alone. She had her son, her home, and the promise of a future where justice and love would prevail. The hours stretched on at a slow, healing pace. Rashid remained by his mother's side, his presence an anchor of security. He helped her get out of bed, his movements slow and careful, and together with Fatima's support, they walked to the bedroom balcony where the morning sun caressed her skin. The fresh air, laden with the scent of garden flowers, was a welcome relief, a breath of life after the darkness of the basement. The matriarch sat in a soft armchair, her eyes scanning the vast garden she loved so much and hadn't seen in so long. A gentle melancholy veiled her gaze, a reminder of lost seasons, of stolen days. Rashid noticed the sadness in her eyes and knelt beside her, taking her hand. "Mother, we will plant new flowers, your favorites. The garden will bloom again just like you." His voice was a whisper of promise, and the matriarch squeezed his hand in response, a faint smile gracing her lips. Fatima, with her usual discretion, brought more tea and some Arabian sweets, carefully arranged on a silver tray. She watched the matriarch with an affection that transcended duty, her own eyes welling up with emotion. The sight of the lady regaining some of her dignity was a balm for Fatima's soul, who had also suffered in silence under Layla's yoke. The matriarch, noticing Fatima's gaze, turned to her, and an unexpected glimmer of concern appeared in her eyes. She gently touched the housekeeper's arm. "Fatima, are you all right?" "Layla, she didn't mistreat you too." Rashid felt a tightening in his chest. Amidst his own pain and his mother's urgency, he hadn't stopped to consider the suffering of the other servants. The matriarch's question, so altruistic in its essence, revealed the depth of her compassion, even after all she herself had endured. Fatima, surprised by the question, shook her head, tears now flowing freely. "No, my lady, not like you, but she was cruel to all of us. She threatened, she humiliated, but I am fine. Now that you are back, everything will be all right." The matriarch, however, did not seem satisfied. She looked at Rashid, her eyes conveying a clear message. "My son, what about the others? The gardeners, the cooks, the security guards?" Layla treated them with disdain. "They also suffered. We need to ensure they are treated with justice, with respect. No one should live in fear in our home." His mother's words were an unexpected turning point for Rashid. He had focused on his revenge against Layla and his mother's recovery, but the matriarch, in her wisdom and altruism, expanded the vision of justice to the entire household. She, who had been the greatest victim, now thought of others. Rashid felt a wave of admiration and shame. His mother, even in her fragility, demonstrated a moral strength that he, in his fury, had neglected. He squeezed her hand more firmly. "You are right, Mother, absolutely. I promise that every person in this house will be treated with the dignity they deserve. I will reorganize everything. Personally, no one else will suffer in silence. This will be a home of respect and compassion for all." The matriarch smiled, a genuine smile that finally reached her eyes, and Rashid knew that by extending justice beyond his own pain, he was honoring his mother's true spirit and rebuilding not just a home, but a community. Rashid, with his new and profound understanding, felt that his mother's words had opened a new dimension in his heart. He knew that justice could not be selective. It needed to embrace everyone who had been hurt under his roof. "Fatima," he said, his voice now softer, but laden with renewed authority and full of purpose. "Please call all the servants to the main hall. I want to speak with them, everyone without exception." Fatima nodded, her eyes welling up with a hope she hadn't felt in a long time, and hurried out, her steps light and full of new vigor. The matriarch watched Rashid, a silent pride in her gaze, a faint smile curving her lips. She had planted a seed of compassion, and he was ready to cultivate it with his whole being. Soon, the main hall, once the stage for Rashid's contained fury and Layla's expulsion, began to fill. Gardeners, cooks, security guards, housekeepers, drivers, all gathered, their faces displaying a mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and a cautious glimmer of hope. They positioned themselves in a respectful semicircle, their eyes fixed on Rashid, who stood beside his mother. The matriarch, seated with dignity in a velvet armchair, radiated a serene calm, her presence a balm for restless souls. Rashid raised his hand, asking for silence. "My friends," he began, his voice echoing with sincerity and a touch of humility that surprised everyone present. "I know the recent times have been difficult. My absence and the conduct of my ex-wife brought suffering and injustice to this home, to this family that we are." He paused, his eyes scanning each face, seeking a genuine connection. "My mother, whom you have always served with loyalty and affection, suffered immensely, and she, with her wisdom and kindness, made me see that her suffering was not the only one. You too were victims of the cruelty and disrespect that settled here." A soft murmur ran through the group. Some lowered their heads, ashamed by the memory of what they had endured. Others dared to raise their eyes, meeting Rashid's firm and compassionate gaze, which offered them a safe harbor. "I ask for your forgiveness," he continued, and the sincerity in his words was palpable, touching every heart present. Forgiveness for not having seen, for not having acted sooner. But this ends today. This house, which has always been a refuge of peace and respect, will be so again. No one will be humiliated again. No one will live in fear or disdain under this roof. He looked at his mother, who gave him a small, encouraging smile, her eyes conveying approval and love. "From now on," Rashid declared, his voice gaining strength and conviction, "each of you will be treated with the dignity and respect you deserve. Your salaries will be reviewed to reflect your worth, your working conditions improved, and your voices will be heard and valued. Fatima will be responsible for ensuring all this happens, and I will personally oversee every detail." Fatima, who stood beside the matriarch, felt tears well up, streaming down her wrinkled face. The relief was immense, a wave of gratitude that flooded her. The servants' faces lit up, some wiping away discreet tears, others exchanging glances of disbelief and profound gratitude. The matriarch, observing the scene, felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. Justice was being served, not just for her, but for all who had been silenced. Rashid continued, "I want you to know that this is your home too, a home where compassion and mutual support prevail. If there is any problem, any need, come directly to me or Mrs. Fatima. My door will always be open to you." One of the older gardeners with a grey beard and tear-filled eyes stepped forward. "My sheikh," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "we thank you for your kindness. The matriarch has always been fair and good to us. It is an honor to serve you." Others nodded vigorously, and a chorus of "Shukran, Sheikh Rashid," "Thank you, Sheikh Rashid," echoed through the hall, a sound of liberation and hope. Rashid felt a weight lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a lightness and a new determination. True healing began there, In that mutual recognition of dignity and respect, he smiled at his mother, who now radiated a deep and contagious peace. That day was not just about expelling evil, but about sowing kindness and rebuilding the foundations of a truly just and loving home. He knew the journey would be long, but with his mother by his side, guiding him with her wisdom and compassion, they would transform the mansion into a beacon of hope and respect for all who lived within it. The mansion would not just be a symbol of wealth, but of human values and a love that extended to every corner and every heart. That day was not just about expelling evil, but about sowing kindness and rebuilding the foundations of a truly just and loving home. He knew the journey would be long, but with his mother by his side, guiding him with her wisdom and compassion, they would transform the mansion into a beacon of hope and respect for all who lived within it. The mansion would not just be a symbol of wealth, but of human values and a love that extended to every corner and every heart. In the days that followed, Rashid immersed himself body and soul in the task of restoring dignity and joy to the mansion. His first action was to personally review the contracts and salaries of all the servants. He spent hours with Fatima, who, with her impeccable memory and deep knowledge of the household, helped him identify every injustice, every silent humiliation the staff had suffered. Salaries were not only readjusted, but generously increased, and new policies of respect and mutual support were implemented. The matriarch, though still fragile, observed the changes with a gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. She spent her mornings on the bedroom balcony, wrapped in a soft shawl, watching the garden that was beginning to be revitalized. Rashid had hired a new landscaper, under his mother's own supervision, to plant the flowers she loved most, filling the air with sweet fragrances and vibrant colors. It was a tangible symbol of renewal, a reminder that life, like a garden, could bloom again after a period of darkness. One day, as Rashid read her a book of Arabic poetry, the matriarch interrupted him with a gentle gesture. "My son," she said, her voice firmer now, "do you remember when we were children and you loved to cook with me? Those days of laughter in the kitchen, the smell of spices." A sweet nostalgia filled the air. Rashid smiled, a cherished memory that warmed his heart. "How could I forget, Mother? Your sweets were the best in the world." She looked at him with a sparkle in her eyes. "I would like to return to the kitchen. Not to cook everything, of course, but to feel the warmth, to guide the hands of the cooks, to share my old recipes. It's a part of me that Layla tried to steal, but which I wish to reclaim." Rashid felt a wave of emotion. It was a significant step, a sign that his mother was not only recovering, but also finding her voice and her place again. "It would be an honor, Mother," he replied, his eyes welling up. "Your wisdom in the kitchen is a treasure. Fatima and the cooks will be delighted." And so, the next day, the mansion's kitchen, which had once been a place of tension and fear, transformed into a haven of joy. The matriarch, seated in a high, comfortable chair, watched the cooks with a smile, giving gentle instructions and sharing culinary secrets passed down through generations. The aroma of spices and homemade sweets hung in the air, a scent of healing and home. Rashid, passing by the kitchen, stopped to observe her. His mother, her wrinkled hands gently gesturing, her eyes shining with renewed passion, was the image of resilience. He approached, and she offered him a small piece of a freshly prepared sweet. "Taste it, my son. It's an old recipe." He bit into it, and the taste transported him back to his childhood, to a time of innocence and unconditional love. "It's perfect, Mother," he murmured, his voice choked. In that moment, he realized that true justice was not just about punishing evil, but about restoring the beauty, joy, and human connection that had been lost. The mansion was becoming indeed a beacon of hope, a place where every heart, every soul found its rightful place and respect. The matriarch's presence in the kitchen was more than an act of cooking. It was an act of love, of healing, and of reaffirming life. The matriarch's presence in the kitchen, more than an act of cooking, became the pulsating heart of the mansion, a catalyst for a silent revolution of joy and belonging. The aroma of spices and homemade sweets was not the only fragrance that spread. A new energy of camaraderie and respect filled every corner. The cooks, once tense and silent under Layla's icy gaze, now laughed openly, their voices echoing with lightness as they shared stories and culinary tricks with the matriarch. She, in turn, listened to them with genuine attention and an affection that made them feel valued. Fatima, in particular, flourished under this new atmosphere. Her steps, once hurried and cautious, were now lighter, and a constant sparkle resided in her eyes. She spent more time in the kitchen, not out of obligation, but for pure pleasure, helping the matriarch organize the pantries with almost reverent care and plan the menus, which now included the favorite dishes of all the servants, a small but significant demonstration that their preferences mattered. Rashid observed all this with a heart that grew lighter each day. The guilt that gnawed at him, a slow poison, diminished with each smile from his mother, with each laugh he heard coming from the kitchen or the corridors. He realized that the true wealth of his empire was not in sparkling jewels or opulent Persian rugs, but in the joy, dignity, and human connection of the people who inhabited his home. He joined his mother and the servants for lunch in the grand dining room, a ritual of togetherness that Layla had abolished, preferring solitary meals in her chambers. Now, the table was always full, not just with delicious food, but with lively conversations, knowing glances, and a genuine camaraderie that warmed the soul. One day, while enjoying afternoon tea on the balcony, the matriarch, with a spark of inspiration in her eyes, suggested they organize a small party. A celebration, she said, her voice soft but firm, to mark the renewal of the mansion and the unity of our large family, all of us together. Rashid, surprised and deeply moved by his mother's initiative, embraced the idea with enthusiasm. "It will be an honor, Mother, a celebration of life, of overcoming adversity, and of our unity." Fatima and the other servants mobilized with a dedication that went far beyond professionalism. They decorated the main hall with fresh flowers from the revitalized garden, hung colorful lanterns that cast intricate patterns on the walls, and prepared a variety of delicacies that reflected the diverse origins and cultures of everyone in the house, transforming the event into a mosaic of flavors and traditions. On the night of the party, the mansion radiated a warm glow, an invitation to joy. The matriarch, wearing a beautiful emerald silk kaftan that Rashid had provided, sat on an improvised throne in the center of the hall. Her eyes, once veiled by pain, now shone with a happiness that seemed impossible just weeks ago. Rashid, by her side, felt immense pride and a deep peace. He saw the gardeners dancing with the housekeepers, the cooks laughing with the security guards, all united in a vibrant celebration of respect and friendship, a true family. He took his mother's hand, squeezing it gently, a gesture of silent gratitude. "Thank you, Mother," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion, "for showing me the true meaning of a home." She smiled, a smile that finally reached her eyes, and said with her peculiar wisdom, "A home is made of hearts, my son, not walls, and ours now is full of love." The party continued late into the night, a vibrant testament that kindness, compassion, and justice had triumphed over darkness. Rashid knew there was still much to do, but the foundation for a future of peace and joy was firmly established. The mansion, once a stage of drama and suffering, had transformed into a sanctuary of hope, a true home for all who lived there, under the aegis of the matriarch and the unconditional love she inspired. That was the beginning of a new era, where each dawn brought the promise of more light and more unity, a legacy of love and respect that would extend for generations. That was the beginning of a new era, where each dawn brought the promise of more light and more unity, a legacy of love and respect that would extend for generations. The days that followed the party were marked by a palpable lightness that permeated every corner of the mansion. The matriarch, with rosier skin and brighter eyes, was no longer content with just the bedroom balcony or the kitchen. Her curiosity, which Layla had tried to stifle, gently resurfaced. She asked Fatima to bring her newspapers and magazines, not just to catch up on the outside world, but to feel part of it again, informed and connected. Rashid observed this transformation with a heart overflowing with gratitude. He spent every free moment by his mother's side, reading to her, listening to her stories, or simply enjoying the peace her presence radiated. The mansion, once a mausoleum of luxury and sadness, now pulsed with the life the matriarch had breathed into it. The laughter of the servants was constant, and the dining table, once a place of silence, was now a stage for lively conversations and sharing. One day, while flipping through an old photo album with Rashid, the matriarch paused at an image of herself, young and radiant, beside her late husband at a charity event. Her eyes filled with a gentle melancholy. "I used to organize so many of these events, my son," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. "We helped so many people, brought hope to so many hearts. Layla, she convinced me that I no longer had a place in those circles, that my age made me invisible." Rashid felt a tightening in his chest. The wound of humiliation was not just physical, it was the loss of identity, of purpose. He squeezed her hand. "Mother, you will never be invisible. Your wisdom and kindness are beacons. If you wish, we can resume these projects. The world needs your light." The matriarch looked up at him, a spark of hope igniting in her eyes. Can I still do it? After so long, after everything? Will people remember? Will they accept me? It was an internal obstacle, the doubt and insecurity planted by Layla's cruelty. "They will not only remember, Mother, they will celebrate you," Rashid assured, his voice firm and full of conviction. "Your absence was felt. Many asked why you had withdrawn. I will tell them the truth, the part that can be told about your illness and your recovery. And we will show everyone that the matriarch is back, stronger and more inspiring than ever." Fatima, who was nearby listening to the conversation, approached with a smile. "My lady, your oldest friends, those who truly love you, never forgot you. They will feel immense joy at seeing you again, and you have so much to offer, so much love to share." The matriarch pondered their words, her eyes scanning the photographs, as if seeking in those old images the strength for the future. The idea of resuming her charity work, of reaching out to the needy, of being a force for good again, rekindled a flame in her spirit. It was a challenge, yes, but a challenge that would bring her out of the shadows, that would make her regain not only her personal dignity, but also her place in the world. Rashid realized that this was the next crucial step in his mother's healing journey. It wasn't enough to restore her physical comfort or the peace of the mansion. It was necessary to restore her purpose, her connection to the world beyond its walls. He knew that society, with its judgments and gossip, could be a minefield, but his mother's strength, combined with his unwavering support, would be enough to overcome any obstacle. The mansion, which had become a sanctuary of healing and peace, was now ready to be the base for a new and grand mission, a mission of altruism and renewal that would extend beyond its gates. The matriarch, with a deep sigh, but with a glimmer of determination in her eyes, finally nodded, feeling a familiar warmth in her chest. "Yes, my son, let's do this. Let's rekindle that flame." It was a bold but necessary step for the complete restoration of her soul and her legacy. The matriarch's decision to rekindle the flame of charity reverberated through the mansion like a hymn of hope. Rashid, with a celebratory heart, mobilized his entire team to ensure his mother's return to public life was a triumph. Fatima, with her unwavering loyalty, became the matriarch's shadow, helping her organize the details of the charity event that would be held in the mansion's own gardens. The matriarch, however, still carried the invisible scars of humiliation. "Will people see me as before, Fatima?" she asked, her thin, wrinkled fingers smoothing a silk fabric. "Or will the whispers about my absence and the truth behind it follow me like a shadow?" Fatima, kneeling beside her, held her hands with affection. "My lady, you are a beacon of kindness. Those who love you will only see the light you have always been, and those who don't do not deserve your concern." Rashid, sensing his mother's apprehension, dedicated himself to protecting her from any malicious gossip. He instructed his lawyers and advisors to spread the version that the matriarch had gone through a period of severe illness and recovery, a narrative that, while not the complete truth, safeguarded his mother's dignity and spared her painful explanations. Invitations were sent to the family's closest friends and to former collaborators of her charity work, people who knew and deeply respected her. The response was overwhelming. The news of the matriarch's return generated a wave of enthusiasm and relief in high society, which had missed her benevolent presence. In the days leading up to the event, the mansion transformed into a hive of preparation. The gardens were adorned with thousands of roses and jasmines, exuding an intoxicating fragrance. Elegant tents were set up, and the kitchen staff, under the matriarch's guidance, prepared a feast fit for royalty, with dishes that harked back to her ancient traditions. The matriarch, though supervising everything with surprising vigor, had moments of introspection, looking in the mirror, questioning if the woman she saw reflected was strong enough to face the world again. Rashid, always attentive, was there to reaffirm her strength. "Mother, you are the personification of resilience. Your presence alone is an inspiration." Finally, the night of the event arrived. Lights twinkled in the garden, and the sound of laughter and lively conversations filled the air. The matriarch, wearing a dazzling white kaftan embroidered with gold, descended the grand staircase, leaning on Rashid's arm. A reverent silence fell upon the guests when she appeared. Her eyes, once full of apprehension, now shone with a mixture of emotion and renewed inner strength. She walked with a dignity that seemed to have been forged in adversity, each step a testament to her triumph. Upon reaching the main hall, the guests rose in unison, and a warm, prolonged round of applause erupted. Many had tears in their eyes, moved to see the matriarch back, more majestic than ever. She smiled, a genuine smile that touched everyone, and nodded in thanks. Rashid, by her side, felt a lump in his throat. His mother was not just a survivor, she was a beacon. She sat in a specially prepared armchair, and the event began. She spoke with a soft yet firm voice about the importance of compassion and altruism, about the need to reach out to the less fortunate. Her words, laden with experience and truth, deeply touched the hearts of those present. People approached to greet her, expressing their joy and admiration. Old friends embraced her, their eyes welling up with emotion. The matriarch, with each handshake, each word of affection, felt the last layer of her armor of pain disintegrate. She was back, not just physically, but in spirit, in purpose. Rashid observed each interaction, each smile from his mother, and knew that this was the true climax of his journey. Not Layla's expulsion, but the resurrection of his mother's soul, the complete restoration of her dignity and her place in the world. The mansion, once the stage of her silent imprisonment, was now the setting for her glorious liberation, a vibrant testament that kindness and resilience always find their way to the light. The soft glow of the lanterns still lingered over the gardens the morning after the event, but it was the light in the matriarch's eyes that truly illuminated the mansion. She awoke with a sense of lightness she hadn't felt in decades, an awakening not just from sleep, but from a long and painful stupor. The memories of the previous night, the warm embraces, the words of affection, the gleam of admiration in the eyes of friends, were a balm for her soul. The doubt, the shadow of invisibility that Layla had cast upon her, had finally dissipated. She was not just a survivor, she was a respected matriarch, a source of inspiration. Rashid, finding her on the balcony, watching the sunrise paint the sky golden and pink, felt a deep peace. He hadn't seen his mother so serene and radiant since his father's death. The guilt that had tormented him for so long, for not having perceived her suffering, finally transformed into gratitude. "Mother," he said, his voice soft, "you were magnificent yesterday. The event was a resounding success." She turned, a genuine and relaxed smile on her lips. "It was because I wasn't alone, my son. I had you, Fatima, and all the kind hearts in this house by my side. Together, we are invincible." In the days and weeks that followed, the mansion flourished even more. The matriarch not only resumed her charity projects, but expanded them with renewed energy. Under her guidance, the family foundation, which Layla had neglected, was revitalized. Schools were built in underprivileged communities. Hospitals received vital donations, and support programs for vulnerable women were established. She didn't just donate money, she donated her time, her wisdom, and her love, visiting the projects, talking to people, offering words of encouragement and hope. Fatima was her loyal shadow, organizing every detail, her eyes shining with the pride of serving such a noble cause. Rashid, observing his mother's tireless dedication, realized that his family's true legacy was not measured in fortunes or properties, but in the positive impact they could generate in the lives of others. He became her right-hand man in philanthropic projects, investing not only resources, but also his intelligence and vast network of contacts. Together, they transformed the mansion into a center of altruism, a beacon that radiated kindness far beyond its opulent walls. The dining table, which had once been a stage for solitary meals for Rashid, was now frequently shared with community leaders, volunteers, and occasionally with some of the people who had been helped by the foundation. The conversations were rich, full of stories of overcoming adversity and gratitude, and the matriarch presided over the table with a warm dignity, her eyes reflecting the joy of seeing good multiply. One late afternoon, as they walked through the now lush gardens, the matriarch stopped before a bed of jasmines, whose sweet perfume filled the air. She touched one of the flowers with her fingertips, a gesture of deep appreciation. "You know, my son," she said, her voice soft and full of emotion, "Layla tried to steal the beauty of the world from me, the joy of living, but she failed. She showed me in a cruel way how precious kindness is and how human connection is the true wealth." She turned to Rashid, her eyes welling up, but with a glimmer of serenity. "Justice was served, not just with your decision, but with the restoration of all that is good. And love, my son, love always finds a way to bloom again, even in the most arid lands." Rashid embraced her, feeling his mother's warmth, the scent of jasmines, and the peace he had finally found. The mansion, once a stage of pain, had become a sanctuary of love and purpose, a home where dignity and compassion reigned supreme, a legacy for future generations, an unwavering beacon of hope. The years unfolded into a tapestry of sunny days and serene nights in the mansion that Rashid and his mother had transformed. The pain of the past was not forgotten, but transmuted into a silent strength, a constant reminder of the fragility of dignity and the resilience of the human spirit. The matriarch, now with an aura of unwavering peace, continued to be the pulsating heart of everything. Her hair, once grey with worry, now shone with the silver of wisdom, and her eyes, which once reflected despair, radiated a light of compassion that reached everyone. Rashid, by her side, had matured in a way that money could never buy. He was no longer just the magnate focused on financial empires. He was a son, a community leader, and a guardian of kindness. His fortune, once a symbol of power, became an instrument for good, guided by his mother's altruistic vision. The Al-Noor Foundation, the beacon in Arabic under the joint leadership of mother and son, expanded beyond the most audacious dreams. Schools flourished in deserts of ignorance. Medical clinics offered healing where before there was only despair, and women's empowerment programs gave a voice back to many silenced women. Fatima, the loyal confidant, remained by the matriarch's side, no longer as a servant, but as a friend and essential collaborator. Her eyes, which had witnessed darkness, now saw the light she helped to spread. She married one of the mansion's gardeners, a kind and hard-working man, and her own family grew within that home that had become a refuge. The mansion, once a stage of brutal contrasts, was now a microcosm of a better world, where every individual was valued and respected. One late afternoon, as the sun set in shades of orange and purple over the mansion's gardens, the matriarch and Rashid sat on a stone bench, watching the servants' children play happily. Children's laughter echoed pure and carefree. The matriarch held Rashid's hand, her wrinkled fingers firmly enclosing his. "My son," she began, her voice soft as the breeze caressing the leaves, "life teaches us lessons in unexpected ways. I lived in darkness, but it was that darkness that showed me the true intensity of light. Layla's cruelty, however painful it was, paradoxically brought us here. It taught us the invaluable worth of compassion, family, and justice that comes from the heart." Rashid bowed his head, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I failed to protect you, mother. That is a pain I will always carry." She squeezed his hand. "No, my son, you did not fail. You learned, and with that learning, you built a legacy worth more than all the treasures in the world. You restored not only my dignity, but the dignity of many. You transformed pain into purpose." He looked at her, and their eyes met, filled with a love and understanding that transcended words. "And you, mother, showed me that hope never dies, that kindness is the greatest strength, and that a true home is where love flourishes, no matter the adversities." The matriarch smiled, a smile that lit up her entire face, and her gaze drifted to the horizon, where the last ray of sun bid farewell. "Yes, my son, and this legacy of love and respect, it will extend for generations. The mansion, our home, will forever be a beacon of hope, a testament that even after the deepest darkness, the light of humanity always finds its way to shine." The children continued to laugh, their innocent voices filling the air with the promise of a bright future. Rashid embraced his mother, feeling the warmth of her presence, the scent of the flowers, and the certainty that together they had built a paradise, not of empty luxury, but of connected souls, shared purposes, and a love that would never fade. The matriarch's story was not just the story of her triumph, but the story of how kindness, when nurtured with care and defended with courage, can transform the world, one heart at a time. The matriarch's story was not just the story of her triumph, but the story of how kindness, when nurtured with care and defended with courage, can transform the world, one heart at a time. This truth took deep root in Rashid's soul, shaping every decision and step he would take from then on. Years turned into decades, and the mansion, once a stage of silent pain and empty luxury, became a vibrant center of life, learning, and purpose. The Al-Noor Foundation, the beacon that the matriarch had rekindled under the aegis of her wisdom and Rashid's management, flourished, extending its arms of compassion throughout the country and beyond. They were not just monetary donations. They were seeds of hope planted in fertile soil, cultivated with dedication and love, transforming lives in tangible and lasting ways. The matriarch, her hair now completely silver, framing a face marked by experience, but her eyes still shining with the same gentle and determined light, continued to be the family's moral compass. She spent her mornings in the garden, watching the flowers she herself helped tend, conversing with Fatima, who had become more than a friend, a soul sister. Fatima, with her own family growing in the mansion, her children and grandchildren shared with the matriarch the joys and challenges of daily life, and together, with a tacit understanding, they oversaw the foundation's projects. The children of the mansion, including Fatima's grandchildren and the matriarch's great-grandchildren, grew up under the matriarch's benevolent shadow, learning early on the invaluable worth of empathy, service to others, and the importance of defending everyone's dignity. They listened to stories of the wise grandmother and how kindness always prevailed, not as a fairy tale, but as a lived truth. Rashid, in turn, had become a man of remarkable serenity, his past fury transmuted into a calm and resolute strength. His financial empire continued to prosper, but his heart was firmly anchored in philanthropy. He taught his own children, who were now young adults, the importance of using privilege to uplift others, not to oppress. His grandmother's story, told with sensitivity and without resentment, was a living lesson about human dignity and the need for vigilance against disguised cruelty, even in the most opulent environments. Rashid's children, inspired by the matriarch's example, began to take active roles in the Al-Noor Foundation, ensuring that the legacy of altruism and compassion continued to expand, spanning generations. The mansion, with its gates always open to those in need of help or inspiration, was a living testament that true wealth resided not in gold or marble, but in the unbreakable bonds of love, respect, and human connection. One sunny late afternoon, as the matriarch watched her great-grandchildren play happily in the same garden where she had once found solace in her deepest pain, Rashid sat beside her on the stone bench. He held her hand, her wrinkled fingers enclosing his, with a tenderness that spoke of years of love and gratitude. His eyes, fixed on his mother's serene smile, were filled with an emotion that words could barely express. "Mother," he whispered, his voice choked, "you not only reclaimed your life, you gave us a new life, a life with purpose, with meaning that transcends any fortune." She smiled, her gaze distant yet filled with a deep and unwavering peace. "Life is a garden, my son, and kindness, like the seeds we plant, always blooms, even in the harshest winters. What matters is to water it with love and protect it with courage, so that the light never fades." The mansion, the home she had saved and transformed, continued to radiate that light, an eternal beacon of hope, reminding everyone that true justice resides in compassion and that love, in its purest essence, is the most powerful force in the universe, capable of healing the deepest wounds and building a future of light and unity for generations to come.